I do know Nick Peering.
Nick Prado?
Nick Prado, yes.
Kyle Zentek?
Kyle Zentek as well.
All right, were these friends of yours?
Very close friends of mine.
Do you recall the night that these individuals were shot?
I do recall the night they were shot.
All right. Let me ask you some questions about that night, okay?
Yes, sir. Go for it.
So we're talking about the night of October 8th to October 9th of 2015. What were you doing earlier that night?
Earlier that night, I believe I had classes. Later on, just hanging out. And then there was a little get-together at a place we call the Courtyard.
Okay.
It's off of Franklin Street. Go ahead.
All right, thank you. I appreciate your eagerness to share the story. Let me ask you where you were living at the time.
I was living at 318 South Humphrey Street.
Okay. That's not the Courtyard then?
That is not the Courtyard.
All right. So you said there was a gathering at the Courtyard. What was the occasion?
It's pretty common for people to gather there. Whether they're invited or they were not, they'd kind of just show up.
Okay. How many people were there when you got there?
When I got there, it's hard to put an exact number on it. I wasn't exactly counting how many heads were there. I'd do a rough estimate of 50 to 75 people maybe.
Okay. And what time did you get there?
I couldn't tell you.
Was it dark?
It was dark.
All right. And the people we talked about, Colin Brew, Nick Peering, Nick Prado, Kyle Zentek, were they there?
Yes, they were. I did not see them at the time, at least all four of them. I do remember seeing Colin. We had been talking a bit before. Nick Peering lives there in the Courtyard, so I assume he was somewhere around the area. Didn't see him before the incident. Don't remember seeing Nick Prado, and I do remember having a conversation with Kyle Zentek or seeing him from the end of the party.
Okay. Let me ask you about a few other names.
Yeah.
Do you recall seeing Nick Acevedo there?
Not until I got into the parking lot and he was holding Colin's body.
Okay. What about Nick Plecky?
Nick Plecky, not until right before we crossed the parking lot after we heard the gunshots.
Okay. So let's get to that point then. At some point, did you hear something that was going on outside of the party?
No, I did not.
So what happened to get you outside of that party?
So the night was breaking down. A lot of my roommates from 318 South Humphrey Street had already made their way back home. And it was time for me to go home as well. Wasn't really in the mood. Wasn't really in the mood most of the night. I kind of took it easy, so I was leaving the back end of the Courtyard that exits toward Franklin Street. And then if I hang a right, that takes me on my way home.
Okay. Were you drinking that night?
I was. I did have a beer with a friend who offered me one. Didn't bring any of my own, however.
Okay. So just the one beer that night?
I believe I only had one beer, to be honest. Like I said before, I wasn't feeling too hot the rest of the day, or throughout the party. I wasn't really trying to rage. Okay. So it was time for me to take it a bit easy.
All right. So you mentioned you were leaving, and so there's a parking lot at the Courtyard, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Did you go through that area?
Not initially. So I exited the back door that leads to Franklin. There's a little alcove that kind of goes over a little covering, and I stood under that for a bit.
All right. And what did you observe at that point?
At that point, when I shut the door behind me, I saw a cluster of people in the middle of the street.
When you say cluster, could you give us an estimate how many people?
Yes, I can give you an estimate. I would say, mind if I do a range?
Yeah, please. Just the best of your memory.
Best of my memory, I would say 5 to 9 people, 5 to 8 people would be probably closer.
Okay. Were there people out there that you recognized?
No, it was dark in the middle of the street. I couldn't really recognize any faces.
All right, you said a cluster, so does this indicate that they were close together?
Fairly close together, yes, sir.
Could you hear what was being said?
No, I could not. I could hear tones. I couldn't hear actual words, though.
All right, when you say tone, what do you mean?
I could tell that they weren't telling jokes in the middle of the street. There was a bit of an argument, words being exchanged, but I have no idea what they were saying.
Was it, when you say there were words exchanged, could you see if there was a confrontation between two groups, or was it just a cluster in the street to you?
It was more of a cluster. Cluster compared to, would you say anything other else? I think cluster is the best word for it.
Okay, no, that's fine. All right, so you hear this interchange, this confrontation in the street. What happens next? What
happens next is all of a sudden the group splits, or the group runs kind of separates from the middle of the street and books. I'm not sure if you're familiar, but in the Mountain View parking lot, there's a cement pathway that leads up to it. I think it's actually like a fire lane as well. And so I kind of watched them head up, most of the group head up that way. And there's probably I don't know if you can park there, but the very front of it. So it'd be is there anywhere I can point?
Yeah.
It's very hard to describe.
Yeah, we'll have some images for you in a minute.
Okay,
Let me
for
break
sure.
that down a little bit.
Yes, please.
You said the group split. Does that indicate that some people went other places than to the
Yeah,
Mountain View area?
actually correct. So it looked like the entire group went towards the Mountain View fire escape, like I said before.
Okay.
But me standing on the sidewalk, I saw one person run the opposite direction. So it would be towards the Grove, if you're familiar. It would be away from Mountain View.
Okay.
As he passed me, he made a comment along the lines of, I got him good, or I cracked him, or something like that. I don't remember exactly what he said.
Okay. Just one individual that you saw passing
Just
by?
one individual ran past me.
Did you recognize who that was?
I did not recognize him at the time, but thinking about it, I actually was able to put a name to the face.
And who was that?
Austin Contreras?
Okay. Was he someone that you recognized being at the party?
No, I did not see him at the party.
All right. So he made this comment to you about cracking somebody or hitting him, and then he went which direction? Toward the Grove, you said?
Towards the Grove, yes, sir.
All right. And then you said this group went toward the Mountain View area. Was it that same amount of people that you described, 5 to 8, 5 to 9?
Yes, I believe so. I didn't see any other people like join the rally or anything. I'm almost positive it was the same group that started in the street.
Okay. At any point before that, did you hear anything about killing anyone or harming anybody?
No, sir, I never heard that.
Did you see anything physical?
Did I see
Between
anything physical?
anybody, yeah.
No, I did not, sir. I didn't even see the punch that kid threw as he ran by. The only way I knew he threw it was the statement that he made as he ran past me.
Gotcha. All right. So where did you stay in that area, or did you follow the group? What did you do?
So I stayed back. I was still on the sidewalk, but I did make my way from the door of courtyard towards kind of the grass and tree little hedge area of the courtyard parking lot. So probably just a couple yards to my right
Okay.
to get a better view of the situation.
And what did you see from that perspective?
From that perspective, I was kind of just observing. There was still just like kind of the same verbal back and forth that was going on in the middle of the street. No physical stuff that I saw. I personally didn't want to get involved. And then all of a sudden, I heard 3 to 4 very, very loud pops.
Okay. Where was this group when you were seeing it from that location?
It's really hard to. I know exactly where they were, and if there's a picture, I can explain. But
Okay. Well, let me ask you this. Were they in a parking lot?
yes, they were in a parking lot.
Was anybody on the sidewalk area?
Sidewalk, as in
You described
where I
a-
was.
You described a sidewalk area in front of Mountain View.
Right, like the road that goes all the way through. Not that I can say for sure. The group was kind of scattered. I mean, the 7 of them were kind of like everywhere. More of a larger cluster, not necessarily in terms of people, but in terms of the distance in between them than before in the street. They were kind of closer together, if that
Okay.
makes sense.
I think so. So you're talking about this cluster wasn't no longer as tightly packed. It was spread out.
Correct.
Okay. And again, could you hear anything that they were saying specifically?
Like I said, it was tones again. Like I could hear that words were being said, but I couldn't make out any words that they were saying. I couldn't understand what was going on. But I mean, I knew it was some sort of an altercation.
All right. Was it physical? Did you see anything physical at that?
No, sir, I did not see anything physical.
Was there anything that caught your attention in the parking lot at that point?
Yeah, so as I was standing on the parking lot, I actually,
And let me give
Yeah, go
just
for
a
it.
timeline. Before the pops happened, before those sounds you heard happened, did you see anything in the parking lot?
yes, before the pops, what actually caught my attention was a very high-powered light that came from about 30 yards out of where the entire larger cluster was. So in like the middle row of parking lot, the middle row of parking spaces, I would say.
Okay. And could you see who was holding it at the time?
No, sir.
You said a high-powered light. What did it look like to you from your perspective?
A type of light that would only be given to a police officer or a security guard or something that if it shined at your face, you probably can't see.
All right. Where did you see the light go from that location?
I saw it actually head towards the group of people.
And how fast was that light moving?
Actually, because of the way the light was moving and because of the speed it was going at, I actually made the assumption that it was like a security guard or a police officer. I wouldn't say he was walking, wouldn't say he was running, but definitely had their knees bent, and they were trying to get to the situation, if that makes sense. So maybe a brisk walk.
Okay. Could you see where the light was shining as that person was approaching?
From my angle, it looked like he was using it like a flashlight. So he was aiming the light in the direction to illuminate the group or illuminate where he was going.
Okay. You said it was about 30 yards in to the parking lot away from that larger group?
Yes, sir.
Okay. When that person approached with the light, did you see if he illuminated anybody in that group?
No, so I actually didn't see him illuminate anyone, but I did see him get closer and closer to the group. Are you asking if I recognized anyone when the light was shown?
Yeah. So when he gets towards the group, you're saying he's approaching the group. Let me ask you this.
Yeah.
How close did he get to the group when you saw that light stop?
When I saw the light stop, I can't say for sure. I can't say for certain.
Okay.
I'm not 100%.
All right. And I made an assumption that the light was stopped at some point. Did that light shine on anybody in that group at that point?
I cannot tell.
Okay.
I couldn't tell.
What happened, if anything, before those the pops that you heard?
So I saw the light approaching, drew my attention. I was fairly interested. I believe one of my friends walked up behind me, Nick Plucky, and then I may have said something to him or been looking at the ground. And as the light was getting closer and closer, that's when he walked up. I said something. He distracted my attention. I distracted my own. And then the rounds went off.
Okay, so you didn't see what happened right before the rounds went off?
No, sir.
After you heard these pops, and I think you described, was it 3 or 4?
I believe it was 3 to 4.
Okay.
I'm not entirely certain.
After you heard those pops, did you see what was going on in that group?
I did see what was going on in the group. Or actually, I did not see exactly what was going on. It caught my attention. Immediately looked up, and then I kind of started making my way to cross Franklin to see exactly what was going on. So from my angle, I mean, I'm a college kid. I didn't assume that there were gunshots, so I went to go see what type of fireworks they were setting off in the parking lot.
All right. So at that point, were you across Franklin at that point, or did you have to cross Franklin?
At what point?
At the point you heard the gunshots?
I had not crossed Franklin yet.
Okay.
I was still on the side of the courtyard sidewalk.
All right. So you said you went toward the sound of the pops.
Yes.
Where did you go exactly?
I went directly towards where the gates open, where you can pull into that first parking lot, closest to the, I want to say north side, the north side entrance, closest to the Grove. Went directly through there, and then, yeah, that's how we made our entrance.
Okay. And you said who was with you?
Nicholas Plucky.
Were you running or walking?
We were walking at first, just to see what was going on, and then as we got closer, I think it was when we finally crossed Franklin, we'd taken a couple steps on the sidewalk on Mountain View side, started putting the pieces together. I saw my friend Nick peering on the ground.
Where was he?
He would have been closest to me. I can't say exactly with words, it's just too hard to explain. But he was in like agonizing pain, and I saw a girl on top of him, and everything started coming together, and I had realized that my best friends had just been shot.
All right. Did you see Colin at that point?
I hadn't seen him yet. I looked down at Nick, and then she said something to me. I don't remember exactly what she said. I looked up, took a couple more steps, and then I saw Colin bleeding out with Nick Acevedo trying to save his life.
When you say, you said she said something to you, I just want to be clear. Who was talking to you at that point?
I believe her name is Mikey. She was on top of Nick. I don't know exactly what she said to me or if she was even talking to me. I believe it's something along the lines of call 911, go put pressure on his wounds or something like that.
All right. And after that is when you recognized Colin on the ground?
After that is when I recognized Colin and I saw Nick Acevedo cradling him. But Colin wasn't just on the ground, he was fighting for his life.
All right. Did you see anybody else that may have had a gun in that area?
I did not see anybody else that had a gun, but I did see one person I didn't recognize standing very close to Nick Acevedo and Colin Brew.
Okay. And what was he doing?
He was just standing over him.
Did you see anything in his hands?
I did not see anything in his hands, but as Nick and I approached, we were trying to help our friend Colin, and it looked like, well, no, he reached for something that was behind him, which I deduced was the weapon he used to shoot down four of my friends.
Objection, Your Honor. Strike.
Sustained.
As the counsel admonished the witness.
Well,
Mr. Volpo, please just answer the question and leave any editorial comments out.
What's
just
that?
answer the question and not leave any editorial comments out, please.
Yes, sir.
Go ahead, Mr. Parker.
thank you. So he brought something out from behind him. Did you see what it was?
I did not see what it was, but
Okay.
I assumed it was the gun. And so the second he reached for it, I'm sorry for, no, I did not see anything behind him.
Okay. No, that's fine. And listen, we just want to get
Can you
your
describe
best-
editorial comments? I wasn't quite clear, I'm sorry.
I'll let the attorneys take care of that. Just answer the questions as best you can.
Yes, sir.
with the facts.
Yes, sir.
Okay?
Yes, sir.
All right. So he reached for something from behind him. Did you see what he did with whatever he reached for?
No, so Nick and I put our hands up in assumption that it was a weapon, and we booked it away.
Okay. And when you say away, which direction did you go?
So this is very hard to put to words. I directly behind the car. I don't know exactly how to
All right.
explain it.
Away from that area.
Away from that area,
Suffices.
yes.
Okay.
To save myself.
All right. So you said Nick. Who's this, Nick Plecky?
Yes, Nick Plucky.
All right. And you mentioned that you went behind a car. Was that also with Nick Plecky?
Yes, I believe so. And a girl, Jamie Donaldson.
Okay. While you were behind the car, did you see what was going on?
No, so actually the second we got behind the car, that's when the next round of gunshots went off.
And when you say next round, how many shots did you hear?
4 to 5.
So estimate for the jury, how much time do you think passed between that first round of gunshots that you described earlier and this round?
I mean, it's going to seem a lot longer probably in my mind or the situation
do
going
your
through
best.
it. But if I was going to do an estimate, I would probably say a minute to 2 minutes.
Let me back up one second.
Yes,
When
sir.
you saw this light approaching from the parking lot, was that group in a stationary place, meaning were they continuing to migrate some direction, or were they in that area already when that light approached them? Does that make
No,
sense?
so once they left the middle of the street into that original driveway or whatever it be, so you call it, they stayed in that larger cluster around in the same exact area. They did not keep moving north or south or east or west. They were all right there.
Okay. All right, so after you hear the second round of gunshots, what did you do?
After I heard the second round of gunshots, it terrified me. I mean, it really scared me. So I took Jamie. We walked up the Mountain View path, the sidewalk, and I was walking her back to her dorm room.
Did you see the shots being fired?
No, sir. We had just gotten behind the car, and when the rounds went off, I had no idea if I was shot or not.
Did you see where Nick Plecky went?
No, I did not. I think at the time I assumed he was with me, but I thought he walked up to with Jamie Donaldson. I have no idea for sure where he was.
Okay. So you and Jamie went toward Mountain View dorm?
Yes, sir.
Where'd you go from there?
From there, I dropped her off, and then I made my way down that sidewalk, the same sidewalk that I made my way up, and I crossed the street towards Courtyard. By the time I was crossing, not by the time I was crossing the street, but by the time I was on the sidewalk crossing the Mountain View parking lot, ambulances and the police had been there, and everyone in the parking lot had their head on the ground, and guns were aimed and everything.
Okay. Zach, when you got to that area, when you heard those first pops, the gunshots, you mentioned that you and Nick went together. Were there other people that you saw coming into that area?
Like approaching the area with
Right.
us? Not that I saw.
Okay.
I believe we were the first ones there after that round that I saw. There wasn't crowds of people coming into the parking lot.
Okay. At some point, did you end up talking to the police?
Yes, I did.
When was that?
That was the morning of, so I think it would have been October 9th, very, very early in the morning after the press conference that was held at the High Country Conference Center after the shooting.
Okay. And why didn't you talk to the police that night after you saw what happened?
I mean, I saw my best friend fighting for his life. I had heard 3 other of my best friends had been shot.
What goes to his mental state, Judge? Why he didn't talk to the police?
I'll allow it. Objections overruled.
I felt that I had to get to the hospital to be there for my friends, to be there to support them and to hold their hands or be as close as possible. I knew that I would talk to the cops at some point or they would come and talk to me, but at that time I had my priorities, and I will always be there for them.
Zach, I'm going to show you an exhibit that's been admitted. It's Exhibit 316 for the record, and I'm going to have you walk through some of the things that you couldn't describe verbally. Okay?
Yes, sir.
All right, Zach, can you see that?
Yes, sir.
I know it's black right now. Let me. Oh, thank you. And Zach, you should have a laser pointer up there. Do you see that?
I do.
So, do you recognize what we're looking at here?
Yes, that is the Courtyard parking lot I was talking about earlier.
All right, let me go to a different view real quick. Where are we now?
We are inside of what is called the Courtyard, the reason for its name. All those doors open up to each other, and that's usually where groups of anyone would really gather.
Okay. Do you remember where the party was being held?
It was mostly in the Courtyard. It was mostly outside, but I do remember people going in and out of doors, so there's multiple doors open. The actual party itself, I believe, I don't know exactly, from this picture, it's tough for me to get a judge of, I don't know exactly how many houses are on that row. I believe it was, yes, that corner house right there. Either that house, or if you could keep scanning as you were, it would have been that, oh, you just passed it. That house, I believe.
Okay.
I'm not entirely certain. I mean, as I said, most people's doors are open and they're going in and out all the time.
All right. Does that laser pointer work, Zach? Maybe the top
I
button?
believe it does. I just don't know how to work it.
May I approach, Judge?
Yes.
Oh,
There you go.
gotcha.
Okay. All right. So you mentioned that you were about to leave the party. Which direction did you go?
So I went inside that door and out the door behind it.
Okay. Out onto Franklin Street?
Yes, sir.
And I think we have a view of that. Let me go over here.
Yep. So it would have been right there.
Okay, so you came out onto the sidewalk.
And in the bike lane, I believe, and I was standing right on the sidewalk.
Okay. And then just show the jury where you went after that.
So after that, the couple yards that I approached would probably be right around that mailbox, maybe.
All right, that's the grassy area with the
That's
trees.
the grassy area with the trees, and the parking lot's right behind it, correct?
All right, so we have a different view here. Can you point out where you saw the group going to from this direction?
So the group, that's the cement driveway sidewalk I was talking of. So it would have been all around this circle, containing this part of the parking lot and like that part of the driveway, I would say maybe.
Okay. Can you describe approximately where you saw that light initially? You said 30 yards into the parking lot.
Yeah, so from my angle, I mean, that wasn't where I was standing, but I can point to it. It was deep into the parking lot, I would say probably like right around there. Maybe where that point is exactly.
Where this point is, this yellow triangle?
Yeah, would you mind clicking on that? Yeah, so I would say, I probably thought it was a bit deeper, but I would say right around there.
Okay. And the group, from this location, where was the group?
The group had migrated a bit more towards the parking lot, so the asphalt, and so they're right around here.
All right, and you indicated that you saw the light moving toward the group, so kind of this diagonal area toward that corner?
Correct, but I believe he was walking, so if there was cars parked right here, I believe he was walking like there was cars there and he couldn't cut through, because I never saw like a break in the light, so the light continued so the light continued this way.
Okay. All right, and where did you go after you heard those shots?
After I heard the 3 shots,
Let me take a different view here.
yes, please.
Oops, too far.
That would do.
All right, how about here?
Yeah, so I was sitting right here about by the trees, heard the 3 shots, start my walk, start to realize what's going on, and then that's when I start walking a bit faster with Plucky, and we come up here.
Okay, and you're walking on this sidewalk area?
Yes, sir.
And where did you end up?
I ended up going from the sidewalk to the asphalt, and then I ended up about right over here. That's when we put our hands up, and then we booked it back this way towards the cover of the cars.
Let me take a different view here. What are we looking at here? Does this describe where
yeah.
you were?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
That's where I was.
All right, you point to the corner of this parking lot area.
Where I was at what time exactly?
When you walked up to the scene, yeah, thank you for clarifying that. When you walked up to the scene, saw Nick Peering and Colin, where were you?
I believe I would have been about right here, Nick Plucky and I, as we approached. Saw everything going on right here. We put our hands up, and then we immediately start running when he reached.
All right, and you're gesturing, running back into the parking lot a ways.
Correct. I believe it was behind that truck, actually.
This black one in front or behind that?
I can't say for certain, but it was one of those 2 trucks.
Okay, and at that point, is that when you heard the second round of gunfire?
The second we got behind that round of cars, that car, we heard the second round of gunshots.
All right, and you described after that, leaving with Jamie Donaldson one direction. Can you describe where that was?
Yeah, if you pan back towards where you were just a second before, so there's a chain link fence right here, and there's a sidewalk that runs right along it. So I walked up that sidewalk. That sidewalk leads to doors that are about right behind that tree. You can't really see. And there they are right there.
All right, the Mountain View front entrance.
Not the front entrance. The front entrance has a roundabout, so there's a
Okay.
couple entrances to it. It's right around that corner.
All right, and you described after that you could see the police arriving. Where were you when you saw the police arriving?
Correct. So right where your mouse is, I was walking down this sidewalk and making my way back towards the courtyard, and the police had everyone with their hands and knees on the ground.
Okay, and you walked down this sidewalk again back to the
Correct,
courtyard?
sir. Yeah, but I don't even believe I made it back into the courtyard. I made it to the sidewalk, saw someone I knew, saw what was going on, and then I actually started making my way towards the house to see my brothers.
All right, may I have a moment, Judge? Just a couple of follow-up questions, Zach.
Yes, sir.
Did you at any point see any weapons aside from the gun that you may have seen?
No, not at all.
Did you see anyone else in the parking lot where that light was?
Could you be more clear with that question?
Yeah, you described a light being about 30 yards into the parking lot. Did
Yes,
you
sir.
see anyone else in that area?
No, sir.
Nothing further. Thank you.
Cross-exam.
So Zach, you essentially walk out of the apartment onto the sidewalk that runs along the north side of Franklin Avenue, correct?
Correct.
When you walked out of the apartment, you were by yourself?
Correct.
And there was a party going on there, correct?
Correct.
There were approximately 50 to 75 people at the party,
Yeah, that was my estimate.
and about half of the people at the party were members of Delta Chi, correct?
That's usually about how it works.
Well, on that particular night, though, it was about half Delta Chi people at the party, right?
That's what I said in my deposition, yes, sir.
Okay. And how many Delta Chi's live at the various apartments that are considered part of the courtyard cluster?
None of them live there right now.
Well, what about back in October of 2015?
Back in October of 2015, I believe, we had 3 units. Each household's 3 people. So that would have make 9 Delta Chi's at the courtyard unit.
And so when you come out of the parking of the apartment, there's already this group that's congregated in front of you?
Correct.
They're in the street at this point?
They're in the street, in the middle of the street.
They're in a cluster, right?
Yes, sir.
And there's about 7 of them?
I put an estimate on it. I put about 7 to 9, I believe I said.
Did you recognize any of the people in the cluster at that time?
No, sir, I did not.
You mentioned earlier your familiarity with Mr. Prado, Mr. Zintek, and Mr. Brew. You recall that?
Yes, I do.
These are all good friends, or were good friends of yours, correct?
Yes, they still are.
Very good friends.
Yeah, they still are.
Okay.
They will be.
And then when you left the party and you see this cluster, there's words being exchanged, and you can't make them out, correct?
Correct.
Does the group start moving towards Mountain View before you see Mr. Contreras run out?
Yes.
Okay. Now, when you saw Mr. Contreras run out, he indicated he had just clocked somebody, correct?
Something along those lines. I'm not sure if that's exactly what he said.
That's a word that you used when you gave a pretrial interview, correct?
Yes, that's what I said, but in the pretrial interview, I told you that it was something along those lines.
Well, you testified earlier to the word clock, did you not?
What are you referring to?
Objection to state's testimony, you said cracked.
Sustained, if you want to rephrase.
Do you recall the words that you used to describe what he said during your earlier testimony?
By earlier testimony, you're talking about my interview with the police the morning of, or my interview with you?
I'm talking about the answers you gave in court just a few moments ago when the prosecutor was asking questions.
Yes, I believe I said clocked or cracked or something along those lines.
Okay, thank you. And then as soon as you see Mr. Contreras, he's basically announcing this as he's running towards you, correct?
He said it to me, yes, as he's running past me.
And you're standing in front of the courtyard at this point.
I'm still standing on the sidewalk.
To use your words, he booked it up north.
Yeah, he was running.
He went straight towards the Grove,
Yes.
east on Franklin.
I'm not familiar with the exact northwest, east, or south, but he went towards the Grove.
You walk out of the courtyard, you're looking into
Mountain
the
View?
parking lot, he runs to your left.
Yes.
Okay. He didn't stick around until after the group had migrated into the parking lot.
No, he was the only one that ran the other way.
He had already booked out long before you heard shots, correct?
Yes.
You never saw him again that night, correct?
Never saw him again that night.
And you didn't know who he was that night.
That night, I did not recognize him.
Had you seen him before that?
I don't really recall. I don't feel comfortable putting an exact answer on it. The way I recognized who he was later on was
We'll get
that.
to that in a second. Let me ask you some questions first.
Okay.
But you knew who Austin Contreras was, what? Right?
I did not know his name.
Somebody you'd seen before, correct?
Possibly seen before, yes.
He'd attended these parties previously, hadn't he?
No, not that I know of.
Okay. And you told the police the night of this incident that you had no idea who he was, correct?
Yes, correct. It was the morning of the incident.
Right, but when you were describing the incident to the police the following morning, when you finally talked to them, you told them at that time you had no idea who Mr. Contreras was.
Correct.
And then when Mr. Contreras runs towards to your left, you start going a little bit to your right, correct?
Correct.
And then the group sort of migrates toward the parking lot, correct?
Correct.
And you don't want to get involved, right?
Correct.
You don't actually see anything right before the shots were fired, do you?
No, I don't. Like I said, I didn't see any muzzle flashes, or I just heard the shots.
And you didn't see what the people were doing right before the shots?
No, I did not.
Let me finish my question first. You didn't see anything that the people on the parking lot were doing right before the shots were fired, did you?
I mean, as I explained, they were in a larger cluster, but I did not see what they were doing directly before the shots.
You did make the observation, though, that things were starting to, in your words, rattle up again after they got in the parking lot.
Yep, they're starting to exchange words again.
Is a group of 50 to 75 people considered a party or a get-together?
It depends on your definition of a party and a get-together.
Okay. You characterize this as a get-together or as a party?
I don't feel comfortable answering that. I'm not sure what you mean by that.
Do you recall how you described it in your earlier testimony?
We call everything a party.
You didn't call it a get-together before?
I don't remember.
Okay. The very first time that you saw Nick Acevedo after you exited the courtyard was after shots were fired?
The first time I saw him was when he had Colin Bro in his arms, trying to save his life.
So that would have been after the shots were fired?
Yes, sir.
Okay. As the group was in the parking lot, you couldn't hear the words that were being exchanged, could you?
No, sir.
When the group migrates from the street into the parking lot, they ran toward the parking lot, didn't they?
They moved quickly. Yes, I'd say they ran.
fact, you used the word split to describe how swiftly they moved, didn't you?
Yeah, that was my definition of move towards. I think I was using lingo in our deposition. I'm sorry about that.
Talk about your testimony this morning. You said they split towards the parking lot, right?
Yes, they split towards the parking lot.
You
That's
also
what I
said they
said.
ran, didn't they?
What's that?
They ran towards the parking lot.
They split towards the parking lot, yes.
Okay. But we could also call that running, couldn't we?
Yes, you can.
By the time the group had migrated over to the corner of the parking lot where you ultimately saw Mr. Peering and Mr. Brew, you had already continued a little further to your right down the Franklin sidewalk, correct?
Yes.
And you still had Franklin Street between you and the parking lot, right?
Correct.
You're still on the courtyard side of the parking lot.
Correct.
When you saw the flashlight come on, you believed that it was very deep in the parking lot, didn't you?
I said 30 yards out.
When you saw the flashlight first come on in the parking lot, you thought it was very deep in the parking lot, didn't you?
30 yards, yes, I believe 30 yards out is deep in the parking lot.
Okay. Well, it was actually, to your perspective, it was a little bit more than halfway into the parking lot, wasn't it?
What are you referring to?
I'm referring to the width of the parking lot.
Yes.
You're looking at the parking lot, right?
Yeah. No, what time are you referring to me saying that?
When you saw the flashlight come on.
Right.
How many times did you see a flashlight come on?
Once, but
That's
when?
what we're talking about, okay?
Yeah, I know. I was there.
Okay. So you're looking at the parking lot. On the left is Mountain View, correct?
Yes.
And the parking lot goes all the way to the right,
Right.
correct?
Yeah.
And what you said is that when you saw the light flick on.
When I said
Answer
in,
my question, please, sir.
okay, I'm confused on when you're saying when you said. That's why I don't understand where you're coming
If
from.
you don't understand my question, when I'm done, have me react.
Okay.
I'm happy to do that.
All right.
When you had the parking lot in front of you,
Yes.
and Mountain View dorm is on your left,
Yes.
and the other edge of the parking lot is on your right.
Yes.
You saw the flashlight flick on.
Yes.
From your perspective, the flashlight illuminated more than halfway or approximately halfway between Mountain View and the other edge of the parking lot.
At the time, I believed it was half of the parking lot. Yes.
Okay. You would agree with me that that is substantially further into the parking lot than what you just indicated for the jury?
Then, at the time, I thought that was half of the parking lot. From my angle, that looks like half of the parking lot. So when I said it flicked on from about half of the parking lot, to me, to my perspective, from what I saw on that awful night, that was half of the parking lot to me.
Okay. How many times have you been to the courtyard?
Countless times.
How many times is your senior year have you been there?
In my senior year, actually, probably once.
Okay. In your junior year, how many times were you there?
Do you mind if I put a range on it?
Sure.
20 to 40.
Okay. You've been an ASU student for going on 4 years.
I go to Northern Arizona University, sir, not Arizona State.
Excuse me. You've been an NAU student for 4 years, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. You're familiar with the Mountain View parking lot, correct?
No, I've never lived in the Mountain View parking lot, so I have not studied the Mountain View parking lot. I know where it is.
You're not familiar with the parking lot.
I know where it is. What do you mean by familiar?
You're not familiar with its general dimensions and how big it is?
No, I do not know the general dimensions and how big a parking lot is.
Okay. So it's your testimony then to this jury that when you said that the flashlight came on halfway into the parking lot, you were underestimating the size of the parking lot?
I was not underestimating the size of the parking lot. Like I said, I believed that would have been halfway through the parking lot.
Okay. When you did your defense interview with this case, I had you fill out a map. You recall that?
I do recall that.
And I asked you to put an X where you saw the light flick on?
Yeah.
Okay. May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
Yes.
I'm showing you what's marked as Exhibit 363. Do you recall this exhibit?
Yes, I do.
Do you recall me asking you, when you had a yellow highlighter, to draw an X where you first saw the flashlight come on?
Yeah.
And you put it right there, didn't you?
Yeah, so that's halfway to the parking lot.
So the jury can better see. Can you just take a loose red marker and make a circle? Where exactly? Please finish before you draw. Draw a red circle just directly around the X that you drew for me to finish it, to denote the spot where you first saw the flashlight illuminate.
Like I said in the interview, I believed it was halfway through the parking lot.
I published the jury on it.
You wish to admit it first?
Yes, I'm sorry.
No objection.
363 is admitted.
Now, just to orient ourselves. The courtyard area, correct?
Yes.
This is not the dorm,
Yes.
and this is the parking lot.
Yes.
Okay. And it was approximately all the way back in here where you say you saw the light first flick on, where the circle is.
I believed it was at halfway through the parking lot, so when you showed me that picture, I'm going to put an X when I see. I didn't have that view when you asked me when I saw halfway to the parking lot. So when you give me the picture and say, where do you believe it happened, I'm going to draw an X in the middle of the parking lot, like I said in my statement.
Your statement to the police, correct?
And in my deposition to you, I said it flicked on from about the middle of the parking lot, which I believe to be about 30 yards out.
So you've been pretty consistent that you saw the light come on halfway in the parking lot.
That's what I said, yes. I said it was about halfway through the parking lot.
And then as you are with Mr. Pletke on the north side of Franklin, you hear some, what you believe are fireworks or some pops, correct?
At the time, yes.
Okay. You cross the street,
Yep, yes,
okay? And then you approach Mr. Peering and you see him on the ground, correct?
bleeding on the ground, yes.
And then you, at some point thereafter, notice Colin to the right of Mr. Peering, right?
Yes, I do notice Colin.
Okay. Nick Acevedo is there also.
Yes, he was the one holding Colin, trying to keep him alive.
Is there anything else that you want to volunteer about the medical condition of these two individuals that I'm not
Objection
asking you about?
argumentative.
Overruled.
I'll withdraw the question.
Question is withdrawn.
You believed, to use your words, or words that you agreed with, that you had a front row seat to this incident, correct?
I believe you asked me that question and I agreed with it in the deposition.
Okay. In fact, you thought and you felt that you and Nick Pletke were probably one of the most critical witnesses to this case.
Did I state that?
I'm asking you if that's your opinion as you sit here today, sir.
As a critical witness, I wouldn't feel comfortable calling myself a critical witness. I don't know what other people saw.
Well, didn't you think that you were an important witness?
I do think I'm an important witness.
Didn't you indicate that you and Nick were the only ones that were able to or that saw what happened
When? When did I indicate that?
in your defense interview?
I'm not sure. Can I see my transcripts?
Do you recall saying that or no?
Objection vague. When and what is he talking about?
I think he said in his defense interview, the objection's overruled.
Do you recall saying that or no?
I do not recall saying that.
Okay.
I don't remember.
You do recall agreeing with me, though, with the characterization that you had a front row seat to this incident.
Yes, you made the statement, I believe, and I agreed with you.
Okay. And you believe that you were pretty much the information source for most of the people who came to the hospital or to the fraternity house later on that date, correct?
Yeah, what do you mean by information source?
I don't know. What did you mean when you said that?
Like to the situation as a whole, I was one of the only ones there that was, everyone else was inside. I was on the outside. So I guess I see what you're saying. Yes, I had the information of the situation.
Okay. And so when you came out of Mountain View after dropping off the female that was with you, you approached one of the many police officers who were there to tell them that you were a witness.
No, I did not.
Okay. You walked to your apartment or to where you were living that night,
Yeah, I was trying to make my way home.
and you encountered some other police officers on your way home, didn't you?
Yeah, I was actually on the corner of the street
Yes
bawling.
or no?
I
You
was
encountered
crying.
some other police officers on the way home, correct?
Yeah.
Did you volunteer any information to that police officer?
No, he was actually mad at me for thinking of making fun of the situation.
Did you let the police officer know that you were a witness and you had information about what had occurred?
No, I believe I was crying a bit too hard. I was a bit of a mess after what I had just seen.
You were so upset about what you saw, but you didn't think it was important to tell the police at that point.
At that point, no, I was crying about my best friend being shot.
Okay. And then from there, you go to where?
I make it back to my house at the 318 South Humphrey Street.
Is that a fraternity house?
That is.
So you live at the fraternity house with how many other Delta Chi members?
It ranges at times, but I think maximum it could hold about 16 people.
How many Delta Chi's were living there at the time?
I don't remember.
When you get home, after walking past the police officer and you're at the fraternity house, do you call the police at that point?
No, I was still a bit of a mess. As I said before, I wanted to get to the hospital to my friend and my brother to make sure I could be standing by his side to help him fight for his life.
Okay, so is that a no? You didn't call the police? From the fraternity
No, I
house?
did not call the
Okay.
police.
And then from the fraternity house, you go to the hospital, correct?
Yes, sir.
And did you talk to the police at the hospital?
No, I didn't see any police at the hospital.
There were no police at the hospital?
I did not see any police at the hospital.
Not any at all?
I did not see any police at the hospital.
Were you in the waiting room?
I was in between the waiting room, I was outside, I was smoking cigarettes, I was crying, and I was also praying, sir.
Okay. And between your crying and smoking and praying, you didn't see any police officers in the waiting room at all?
Not that I
Objection asked
recall.
and answered.
Overruled.
Yeah. How many times are you going to ask that?
Can you ask it again?
I can answer again.
Okay, so you didn't see any police officers, for example, standing by the entrance or exit to the waiting room at the hospital?
No, sir. When I got to the hospital to support my 4 best friends that were shot, I did not see any police officers to my knowledge.
How long were you at the hospital that evening?
It's very hard to say. The hospital staff kind of wanted to push us out because we had such a large gathering with the community. They actually wanted us to go outside. When we went outside, we linked up in hands and started praying. I actually led the prayer, but it was going in and out. I can't put an exact time on it.
Okay, well, aside from describing what you did, my question is, how much time did you spend there? If you can't give me an exact time, can you give me a range, please?
An hour to 2 hours to 3 hours to 4 hours. I actually can't give you a range. I was thinking of other things rather than looking at the clock.
So you're at the hospital anywhere from 1 to 4 hours that evening?
You can say that.
And then from the hospital, because you say you didn't see any police officers there during those 1 to 4 hours, did you make any effort at that point to contact the police?
No, at that point was the press conference where they would be talking about the murder. And
Your Honor, move to strike non-responsive.
oh, I'm sorry. When they were talking about
Just
the
a
shoot.
second, please.
Oh,
Let
sorry.
me rule. The objection is sustained. That last comment is stricken.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that.
I'm not asking about anything that happened after the hospital. If you don't understand my question, please let me know. I'll be happy to rephrase it. My question is, while you're at the hospital, did you make any effort to attempt to contact the police on your own?
No.
While you were at the hospital, you were discussing what you thought you had observed with your other fraternity brothers and friends there, weren't you?
I never said that.
You
Is
did,
that
not
in-
you did not discuss the incident with the other people at the hospital?
We were worried about other things. People asked what had happened. I told them there was a shooting. I wasn't going to sit there and go into full detail about the most dramatic event that had ever happened to me, and that probably will ever happen. So we, like I said before,
Actually,
we,
Your Honor,
we were,
move to strike non-responsive.
Sustained. Mr. Volpo, please answer the question. Yes or
okay.
no?
It's a simple question, sir. Did you or did you not discuss the incident that you believed you had witnessed with the other people at the hospital?
just as much as saying there was a shooting.
Okay. And then, when you heard the first round of gunshots from across the street on Franklin, you were not the only people who approached, correct?
Yes, I was with Nicholas Plecky.
In addition to you and Mr. Plecky, there was approximately another 10 to 15 people who approached, correct?
I believe that's what I said. Approached?
Who heard the noises and approached the parking lot area.
I'm like at the same time as me, I didn't see anyone approach with me. I believe I was talking about the people inside of the parking lot.
You recall telling the police, so the rounds go off, and the last thing I assume it was where the noise being gunshots. I thought it was fireworks or something, so I approached the situation along with 15 or 15 other people who had heard the noises. Do you recall
Yeah,
saying-
do
you recall saying that to the police?
the morning of, but in terms of what I was trying to say was that they were the 15 to 10 other people that were already there, not approaching with me. I did not run up with a wave of people.
When you approached the individual who you say reached for something behind his back, your testimony this morning, if I understood it, was that you put your hands in the air?
Put my hands up like this.
You put your hands up for him, towards him?
Yeah,
Okay.
like don't shoot.
Because you reached to his back?
Because as we approached, saw what was going on, and got closer and closer, I saw him, we drew his attention, and he reached for something behind his back. And after seeing two friends on the ground that had been shot, I assumed it was a gun, so yes.
So when you first approached, he just puts his hand behind his back and you put your hands out?
I put my hands out the second he starts reaching, and then that's when I start running back.
You didn't say anything to the police about putting your hands up or your hands out, did you?
I don't recall.
Yes. What is 92? What is 92? Okay.
This is Exhibit 92, sir. Can you just flip through that and identify that as a transcript of your interview with the police the next morning?
Yes, this is a transcript of my interview with the police the next morning.
And that's one of the transcripts that you reviewed prior to your testimony this morning, correct?
Correct.
And can you agree, flipping through there, that there's nothing in there where you indicated to the police you had to put your hands up or your hands out?
I do not recall.
You don't recall seeing that in there, do you?
I don't recall if it's in here or not.
Okay. Well, if you see it in there, you'll let me know, okay?
Okay, so do you want me to read this while I'm up here, or?
No, I'll give you a chance to look through it, and you can let me know if you see it, okay? I'll move on to another question.
Okay.
When you, excuse me, after you approach the corner of the parking lot where you saw your friends, and then you duck behind the car, you hear additional shots almost immediately, correct?
Yes, the second we get behind the car, I hear next round of gunshots.
And then you make your way over to Mountain View and drop off this female, correct?
Correct.
Part of the reason you went to Mountain View is because you wanted to go see the guys and everybody who knew.
That is not why I would have went to Mountain View. None of our guys live at Mountain View.
Well, why don't you go ahead and take that transcript I just handed you and turn to page 10.
I took her to yeah, okay, page 10. I'm here.
All right, now you see on line 11,
Line 11.
you're asked the question, and then from there, after those shots happen, then what? What did you do? You see that question on lines 11 through 12?
I do see that question.
Okay, and can you read your response in lines 13 through 19?
Me and the girl walked up the sidewalk along the field, along a chain link fence. I walked her back to the Mountain View dorm because I wanted to go see the guys and everyone who knew. So by that statement, I wanted to...
Excuse me, I'll give you a chance.
Oh, you want me to read the whole thing?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah, sure.
I'll tell you what, let me read it and you can let me know if I read it correctly. Me and the girl walked up the sidewalk, along the field, along the chain link fence. I walked her back to her dorm to Mountain View because I wanted to go see the guys and everyone who knew. I didn't want to be with some random girl, and so dropped her off at the dorm, and I started my walk back, and I walked back like down the fire escape. By that time, the streets were lined with ambulances. They had everyone on the ground by the time I was walking past, and that's the rest of the event that I saw. Was that your response to the police?
That was my response to the police.
Between the time of this incident and when you spoke to the police, I'm sorry, let me back up. Between the time you spoke to the police the following morning and the time that you spoke to me for your defense interview, over a year had passed, hadn't it?
Yes, it had.
And you spoke to friends of yours during that period of time about what you believed you had observed, hadn't you?
Yes, I had mentioned it.
Could you walk us through again the path that you took from the Mountain View dorm to your fraternity house that evening?
Yeah, so from the Mountain View door, I walk down that cement sidewalk fire escape driveway, back until it gets you to Franklin Street, cross Franklin Street, get on that side of the sidewalk, right next to those trees I was standing at before, and then from my view, or from my angle, if you turn left, that takes me back to my house.
So when you exited the Mountain View parking lot, you were essentially walking on that driveway or sidewalk that's right between the parking lot and Mountain View?
Yes.
Right between the sidewalk and Mountain View dorm, correct?
Yes. What would you like me to refer that as?
If we're on the same page, that's fine. As you exited through that, can we call that the main entrance to the Mountain View parking lot?
I get there's two entrances, but yes, you can call it the main entrance.
This is the entrance across the street from the courtyard, right?
Correct.
As you traversed through the main entrance across the street from the courtyard, after all the shooting had completed, did you see anybody there?
Anybody where?
The area we were just talking about, that entrance area.
It was lined with fire trucks, and yes, there was a bunch of people. I mean, everyone had their hands on the ground. There was guns pointed, and
Anybody in particular you could identify?
no, sir.
Just a few more questions, sir. Do you recall how long you were at the party that night?
No, I do not.
It was dark when you left, correct?
It was dark when I left.
The lighting conditions affected the degree to which you were able to see things, didn't they?
The Mountain View parking lot is like fairly well lit. The street is a bit darker, but I mean, you can definitely see.
Could you make out any faces of the people who were in the parking lot?
No, sir, I cannot.
Could you hear any words that were being said?
No.
When you exited the courtyard upon leaving the party, were you alone or were you with anybody else?
I was alone. I was making my way back by myself to go home.
So you weren't with Kyle's Intech at that point?
No, sir.
You weren't with Nick Acevedo at that point?
No, sir, I was alone. I was by myself.
You You weren't with Nick Peering at that point?
No, sir, I was alone.
So, from the time you left the party until the time you next saw Nick Acevedo was after you ran into the parking lot and saw him with Colin, correct?
Correct.
You weren't hanging out with Nick Acevedo by that main entrance to the parking lot as the group was splitting north and it was ratcheting up.
No, I was watching from the sidewalk.
You weren't with Nick Acevedo when you heard pops coming from the cluster from the first time.
No, I was standing next to Nick Plucky.
You know who Nick Acevedo is, right?
I do.
He's a friend of yours?
He is.
If he was standing next to you, you probably have a pretty easy time recognizing him, wouldn't you?
Yep. Yes.
What got your attention to the parking lot at the time was the light turning on, correct?
Yes, the high-powered light.
Okay. And you couldn't tell specifically what the light was being pointed at, could you?
It was being pointed like he was using it like a flashlight. It was being pointed towards the confrontation he was approaching.
So it was still a confrontation at that point?
Words were still being exchanged, yes.
You had a belief or an understanding at that point that it was a light affixed to the gun, or you didn't know at that point?
Nope, I thought it was just a high-powered light that I believed to be either a police officer or a security guard that was going to break up whatever was going on.
Okay, we understand that the light was very bright in your estimation. I'm not asking you how bright it was. I'm just asking you if the way it was being held appeared to be any different than someone who'd be using a flashlight just to walk across the parking lot.
Could you say that again?
Yeah, there was nothing unusual about the way the light was being held from your perspective.
He was just using it to illuminate the way.
Okay. When you saw the light, you didn't think to yourself, that light looks like it's attached to a gun.
Nope.
Okay. When the light came on, you didn't think to yourself, geez, that parking lot is so well lit, why would somebody need a flashlight to see where they're going? Is that a no?
No.
He had the beam headed towards where he was walking, correct?
Correct.
As the flashlight approached the group, there was still arguing going on, correct?
Yes, there's still words being exchanged.
And then Nick Plecky went with you, to the best of your knowledge, behind the vehicle after you saw the individual reach behind him?
To the best of my knowledge, yes.
When was the next time you saw Mr. Plecky?
I do not recall.
Prior to that, when was the last time you saw Mr. Plecky?
Prior to what?
Prior to you ducking behind the car in the parking lot.
When he walked up next to me when I had moved from the sidewalk to the grass area where the trees are, I believe that's when he walked up next to me. So that would have been the last time I saw Mr. Plucky.
You never saw any interaction between Mr. Acevedo and the person that you believe was holding the gun after you approached that area of the sidewalk, of the parking lot?
I believe they were exchanging words, or Nick was saying something to him. I don't recall what he was saying, though.
Purely just verbal, though, correct?
What do you mean by purely just verbal?
Was there any physical interaction between them?
No physical interaction.
No punching?
No punching.
No hitting?
No hitting.
No gun pointing?
Not that I know of.
Not that you saw, correct?
Not that I saw.
Okay. In fact, you never even saw a gun.
I never saw a gun.
You're not able to say how far the person holding the gun or the flashlight was from Mr. Brew at the time the shots were fired, are you?
I'm not comfortable putting an estimate on it. No, I'm not able to say that.
Similarly, you're not able to say how far the person holding the gun was from Mr. Peering at the time shots were fired, are you?
No, I wasn't counting my steps as I was trying to save my friends.
If I got just a very brief moment, Your Honor.
Sure.
Okay, just a couple other things. You didn't actually see Mr. Acevedo punch anybody?
No, and I never said Mr. Acevedo punched anyone. I said Mr. Contreras punched
Misspoke.
someone.
Sorry, you never saw Mr. Contreras punch anybody?
No, I did not.
Okay, thank you for correcting me. I apologize, I misspoke.
It's okay.
When speaking to other Delta Chi members about this incident, since it occurred, you've given an account of what you saw, haven't you?
Yes, I've told them what I saw. What do you mean by that question?
Well, would you not characterize yourself as pretty much the information source most people were...
Objection asked and answered and relevance.
Let me hear the question.
Would you not characterize yourself as being pretty much the information source most people were coming to because you had a pretty good view of the situation and saw most of it?
The objection's overruled.
I would say people saw me as an information source, yeah.
And you likewise considered yourself as an information source, didn't you?
Yeah, because they kept coming up to me, asking me what happened, so I made the assumption that I could be characterized as an information source.
Did you at any point, after you finally spoke to the police the following morning, voluntarily initiate or attempt to initiate contact with the police or the prosecutor's office to report any new information that you may have come onto or come into?
Not until I had my deposition with you.
And that you were contacted to come in for that, weren't you?
Correct, I had it scheduled.
Right. But my question, though, sir, is whether you yourself ever initiated any subsequent contact with the police or the prosecutor's office.
Nope, never did.
And you had no idea or sense as to why Mr. Contreras may have punched somebody that night, do you?
No, sir, I do not.
So let me just finish off by finishing off on the chronology after the hospital. You mentioned something about a press conference?
Yes, there was a press conference held at the High Country Conference Center.
That was the following morning?
That was the morning of, yes.
You attended that?
I did attend that.
Did you go there directly from the hospital?
I believe, I am actually not 100% certain, so I'm not sure.
Okay. Do you recall where you may have stopped between the hospital and the press conference?
If I were to, I'm not going to guess on that. No, I don't.
Did you attempt to initiate contact or identify yourself as a witness to any police officers at the press conference?
No, I did not.
Where did you go after the press conference?
I went back to my room, back to my house.
The fraternity house?
My house, yes.
And I'm not trying to split hairs, but is it a house where multiple fraternity members all live, or are there separate houses that are all like a complex and everybody has their own house?
What do you mean by house?
Well, that's what I'm trying to figure out, what you mean by a house. Are you talking about, you said it's your house, were you the only one who lived there, or were there also other fraternity brothers who lived there?
Other fraternity brothers live there too. I don't live there by myself.
Okay, so how many other fraternity brothers were there when you went there after the press conference?
I have no idea.
How many of them did you speak to about the incident?
I don't recall. I don't remember.
How many people did you speak to at the hospital about the incident?
We were more praying and consoling each other. I was pretty quiet at the hospital. I was one of the ones crying the hardest, I believe.
At no time did you talk to anybody at the hospital about the incident?
I don't remember. I was a head case. I was just hoping my friends were alive.
And what about at the press conference?
At the press conference? No, we were listening to the press conference.
And then after the press conference, you go back to the fraternity house, and you talk to your fraternity brothers. Do you then at that point pick up the phone and initiate contact with the police?
No, I don't.
In fact, you never once initiated contact with the police, did you?
Nope. I assumed that they would be here, and which they were. They showed up on my doorstep.
The police came to you?
Uh-huh. Yep, a detective did that morning, right after the press conference.
Okay. Similarly, in January of this year, you were contacted for the scheduling of your defense deposition, or defense interview, correct?
January of this year. I'm not sure what month I was contacted, if that's what it was, sure.
Okay. And aside from that, you haven't had any contact or communication with the police in this case?
No, I have not.
You've made it pretty clear through your testimony today that Mr. Brew was somebody that you were very close with.
Everyone in the chapter I'm very close with. We're brothers. I would say that about every single one of the guys in the chapter.
There's nothing that you wouldn't do for Colin that you wouldn't do for any other fraternity brother?
No.
You guys are actually like blood
A
brothers.
brotherhood. Blood brothers.
You look out for each other, don't you?
Yes, we do.
You have each other's backs, don't you?
We do.
You support each other.
Yes, that's what a brotherhood is.
Okay. And you feel that strong brotherhood as you testify here this morning, don't you?
I do. And I feel Colin looking over me, too.
Move to strike, Your Honor.
It is stricken. Last comment is stricken.
So when you got to your fraternity house after being at the hospital and after being at the press conference, were you or were you not aware at that point that Colin was deceased?
Yes, I believe we had gotten the news that he was. I don't exactly remember what time, but I believe I had known.
So you knew that Colin had passed away prior to the police contacting you, correct?
I don't know. I'm not sure.
So during this whole stretch of time, you were satisfied not knowing whether Colin survived or not?
Me personally, after what I had seen, when I approached the situation and Colin fighting for his life, I unfortunately made the assumption that he wasn't going to make it.
Okay. So you were of the assumption or belief that he had passed away basically from the time you saw him after running to the parking lot?
Not from the time after I saw him, but I mean, hopes weren't very high.
Your hopes weren't very high that he was still alive when you were at the hospital, were they?
No.
Your hopes weren't very high that he was alive when you were at the fraternity house before going to the hospital, were they?
No.
Your hopes weren't very high that he was alive when you were at the fraternity house after the hospital?
No, not after I saw the bullets in his chest. It was just, I mean, there was no way. He was trying so hard.
Okay. Yet despite that belief that your dear brother had fallen, you at no time made any effort whatsoever to contact the police. Isn't that true, Mr. Volpo?
Yes, because I wanted to be with my brothers and pray.
You wanted to be with your brothers and pray, or be with your brothers and get your story straight?
Be with my brothers and pray. I wanted to make sure that we could stick together and to anything, to any hope to God, try to bring hopes high.
Sticking together is an important part of brotherhood, isn't it?
It is brotherhood.
And that concept of sticking together is basically the essence of your relationship with your Delta Chi brothers, isn't it?
I mean, sir, you're asking the same question over and over. Yes, we are we're a brotherhood.
And I realize that you're speaking about yourself, but you would expect that same type of commitment and devotion from your brothers in return, wouldn't you?
I don't expect it, I know it.
You can assume it's there, right?
I don't assume it's there.
No question in your mind.
No question on my mind.
Have a brief moment, Your Honor.
Yes.
May I use the restroom, Your Honor?
Just a second. We'll take a break here in just a second.
No further questions, Your Honor. Thank you.
All right, folks, let's take a 15-minute recess. Please remember the admonition. All right, and I'm going to ask the media if you would cut the audio feed while we're on break.